Just as the real economy is always fluctuating, so is the animal jam economy. How is it really in 2024? Well, it's not doing the best. I'll explain shortly. This video is for Animal Jam Classic only. Animal Jam Play Wild has its own circumstance that would probably need to be talked about during a different video entirely. Wow, there's 2 red dogs. So yeah, we're only talking about Classic today. That is perfectly fine. There is definitely enough to talk about here. The first problem that the Classic economy is having right now is the lack of rarity towards clothing betas. Have you ever wanted a worn blanket, a fox hat, or a non-member sword? Well, yeah, you can pretty much get them for very, very cheap now. They're worth almost nothing. If you wanted one of those, you can find them in the shop for probably like 1 diamond. And that's because of these adventures right here. One thing that has been happening is, especially with these first 2 adventures like Return to Phantoms, you could complete the adventure and win a clothing item as a prize if you choose the correct chest. In the hard mode, this chest has a lot of cool items like rare bow and arrows, worn blankets, and all the different items like that, which people have wanted for a long time. While these items are still super popular, they have become much less rare because of how many there are in the game now. Originally, the only way you were able to get these items when they first came back was through Sky High, the minigame. People weren't really that good at it, so there weren't that many that won the items from that game. Eventually, people have started farming the adventures. Return to Phantoms, Phantom Portal, most likely for these clothing betas. One thing that really kicked off them becoming worth nothing is the botting of this adventure. There's some way that people botted the adventures to make you complete it immediately, so people were completing these adventures immediately and being able to win the items in a few seconds rather than half an hour or however long it took to actually win those items. So they started going down big time quickly. Clothing betas were originally used to trade for den betas, but by this point, you gotta trade like 15 to get a den beta or something, so I don't know if it's even worth it by this point. And that just brings me to the next point about this, is that the whole thing about trading up as a non-member, especially getting your first den beta and all that, is getting much more impossible. Originally, you were able to use Rare Item Mondays to get clothing betas and get clothing betas to get a den beta, and nowadays you have to either trade like 20 and find somebody that actually wants those almost worthless items, or you can be a member and buy an item from a shop for 25 to 30 diamonds, however much a den beta goes for these days. Some items that were originally counted as clothing betas also came back into stores, which definitely lowered the supply of clothing betas in the first place, but then just made it harder and more limiting to actually get items that counted in this category. One example is the Arctic Hood, which isn't in store right now, but has come back a few times already, and used to be a clothing beta, now is worth only a few rare on Mondays. It's just a seasonal item now. Same thing with the Jamalade bow. It returned 1 year. I don't think it's seasonal, but it returned 1 year and lost almost all its worth compared to in the past. Even though I think now you could still probably sell them for a little bit of diamonds, but that just goes with a lot of these seasonal items that people don't want to wait for. You could probably sell them for a little bit of a profit if you just buy a lot and wait until later. There are even some clothing betas that people just started to hate. The Pirate Sword is not member and is pretty cool, but people started to hate it before these other ones like the Worn Blanket and Rare Bow and Arrows. I'm not sure why. I guess people's psychology is just like, oh, you could just become a member and get the normal one. I don't exactly know why, but that started becoming more and more worthless comparison to the other clothing betas before this even all started. Now that they're all kind of equal though. And another item is the Beard. I mean, the Beard came back from Forgotten Desert. They used to be like one of the rarest items because nobody bought them in the beta. But now that they're available in Forgotten Desert, no one really cares about them. So I guess that makes sense. Our current clothing betas are only the Worn, Fox Hat, Rare Bow and Arrow, and Mech Helmet. That's 4 items out of all the different types of items in the whole game that you could use to trade for den betas, which is kind of sad. And while they have taken spikes out of adventures, if you watch my old video about that, you might remember that, they did not take these out, and as a result of all this time passing, it's been probably close to 10 years since they released these hard mode adventures, obviously demand would fall and so will worth. We're here in Brady's lab, also known as the trading center place of like all of Jama. I don't know exactly why it's Brady's lab, but yeah, if I go through that door over there, I'm gonna see a lot of people trading. Why are we here, you might ask? Well, our next thing about how the economy is basically just imploding on itself is the hoarding problem that has become very annoying and bad recently. Worth changes all the time, obviously. And right now, you could say that worth has gone down for a whole lot of items. Let me explain this. Okay, so this is a Excel spreadsheet of all things, Headdress worth over the years from August 2016 all the way to last month, July of 2024. I have counted 1 month at the end of the month going through animaljam's worth wiki and taking the latest edit of worth by that point during this month. So for example, if the last edit for August was the 28th of that month, I'll take that and take that as August's worth. If there were no edits in September, I would still take August's worth because by the last day of September, you would still be checking that page and would still say that. I have compiled all these into a worth graph that is really interesting to see. So you can see here that there were a lot of downs and ups during the past around 10 years of tracking all these different items' worths. Especially during 2021 when the pandemic was happening, you could see that light pink headdresses were worth 300 black longs at one point, which is insane. That is a lot of black longs. I don't think someone even has that much, but I'll probably be greatly mistaken because people are crazy on this game. So yeah, it's very interesting to just see all these different numbers, but you probably want to see the graph. So here's the graph right here. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to figure out how to make the actual colors match with the headdress colors, but you could figure that out on yourself. I think you're smart enough. You can see here that during 2021, all the headdress worths, especially light pink, went up like crazy. Eventually, this died down about August of 2023 when they went back to 2020 and early 2021 numbers, and are now almost as low in worth as 2019 and 2020. Headdresses have dropped a whole lot worth-wise. You might be saying, oh, because people don't like headdresses as much, that culture has basically died out. I would say, yes, that's probably part of the problem. But another thing, though, is that this really encapsulates how all big items really work in this game. Or I'm not going to say big items because magenta items and stuff like that are not like this. They're worth so much because they're only one in-game or whatever. But big items like glossy cupid wings, tiki masks, party hats, headdresses, they all have a similar worth trajectory as these. They went up at one point and then they're back down again. Seeing this and then going over to this blue one to not show the light pink headdress because it's such an outlier, you could see that, yeah, it all started going down again in August of 2023, and it's at pretty much a low point right now. It could keep going down low, but right now, if you were able to get a headdress for this price back then, you would have been profiting big time. One thing that people are doing, they are hoarding all these items. Before we talk about that, though, let's look at the spike worth, which I also tracked at this time, just to basically show stability of the spike. Because all these are measured in black longs, but a black long could be different from year to year. That's basically the same thing as saying, oh, a hamburger cost 15 cents in the 1950s and costs $12 in the 2020s. But how much does a dollar have worth-wise nowadays? And it went down dramatically. Here, pretty much all these Den betas worths for all these spikes stayed the same throughout these 8 years. The only differences are that black longs definitely varied in price, and a few of these decent longs and good longs went up or down, depends on the month, to be honest. But they all pretty much stayed around the same, and this is what it looks like. You can see right here that blue and pink kind of somehow changed worths, And that is because of the hoarding problem. Look at what I am in right now. That is almost 60 hot magenta tiaras, which is absolutely insane. I don't know how or why someone has this many, but this just shows a visual representation, a dictionary picture of the Animal Jam hoarding problem. My guess on how this happened is 2021, you could see with the graph that everything was very highly valued. If people had black longs, they were able to trade for these items, so people were probably accepting black longs for their items, and we're getting a lot of them in the process. So nowadays, with everything being low in worth, our pink headdress is something like 12 black longs or something like that. Pretty low in comparison to the 40s, 50s that it was in 2021, that people are using their black longs that they got from that time to sweep up these items. And I mean, one thing that they do is they trade for these high items with purely black longs. People call it quote unquote pure or whatever. For the most part, people are going to accept an offer in pure for their item. That's basically telling somebody that, okay, I want to buy your lemonade for actual dollars in comparison to trading it with like fruit punch or something. Obviously, you're going to accept the money. Money is accepted everywhere, right? So that's basically the same for like the Animal Jam version. The black long is the universal currency. You could trade it to get anything you want. So people are obviously going to accept that. So because the economy's down right now, and it's so cheap to slurp up these items, people are hoarding like crazy. Some examples of items being hoarded, besides these hot magenta tiaras you see right here, are contest items in general. These items have become really popular, especially with all these new spikes and tails that match them. So basically any hot magenta item, stuff like slime green items as well, are all being traded for and hoarded, and as a result of that, they're going up in worth, and probably the person's going to profit by the end of this, which is a little scummy, but I guess is also not against the rules. Another example of items being hoarded are tiki masks, especially this blue one over here, the lowest worth one. People have been trading for this mask, and because these haven't been back since like 2010, it's been like 14 years since these have been in store, there's only a very limited supply of them. So if you take away the supply, up goes the demand and up goes the worth. This also goes for items like the tan tiki mask, which I think they're also hoarding at this point. And another item that really hits home that people are starting to hoard are poor founders hats. And I do not like this whatsoever. Sorry about glitching right there. I'm super powerful, so that happens often. It really hurts to see that people are taking the founders hats, which are worth like a black long, maybe less than 2 at this point, and they seem to be hoarding them now, which is not a great thing. I am not a fan of hoarding whatsoever. I think that collecting is fine. Like, this room is completely fine. One of each is fine. I think that you are allowed to collect items if you like them. But hoarding like this, I don't think you should be able to do this. Or you should be frowned upon very much. And if you're looking to trade for an item, try to avoid someone that is a hoarder. Because it's just going to become one of an army. While if you could trade it with somebody that really wants that item, do it with that, they'll keep it forever, and they'll love it. Like, I would hate to see that my founder's hat, if I only had one, is in someone's hoard and I'm not able to get it. It would just be really sad. I think that because the item worth is so down right now in comparison to how it was a few years ago, people have all this to spend. It's like basically buying a stock when it's down instead of up, which is obviously the main thing to do. I think you buy low, sell high, or whatever. It's just really sad to see that all these items, a lot of people, different people could all own, are being hoarded by only a few people in the community and get out of the trading system forever, or at least until they decide to bring it back in and profit off of what they're doing. What's your opinion on hoarding? Do you think that this is a good thing that's happening? You already know my answer, but I'd like to hear yours. Are there any items that you wish you had but might not be able to get now because people are trading a little too much for them and the worth has risen dramatically? Leave a comment about that as well. I'd like to hear what your opinions are on all of this. If you like my content, then why not subscribe? And with that, this is Brad Stormer, storming out.